right.
Ready.
All right.
Thank you all for coming.
There is, thank you.
Yes.
You want to start it?
Okay.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Helena and this is my co-partner Allison. We're here today to talk to you about raising an intuitive eater, both for kids and for teens, and some kind of do's and don'ts as far as nutrition. How do we talk about nutrition at home so that it's supportive to both yourself and your family? Super excited today.
All right, so I'll just give you kind of brief, overview of like who we are. So we are an eating disorder practice. So we practice with evidence and all-inclusive practice that focuses on supporting individuals as they overcome the many challenges that are present during eating disorder or even disordered eating recovery. So we help them by exploring their own relationship with food, while they begin to kind of let go of diet culture, different diet beliefs, guilt around food, body image struggles. We see that recovery is a progress versus perfection, so that's kind of the best way to set them up for that long-term success. So we kind of help them, that's Helena's line there, we help enlighten, we here at Enlighten help shed light on their journey as opposed to that finish line. So we are located in Leesburg, just down the road, and we're both registered dietitians, which I just realized is definitely not on this slide either. So that's kind of us just in an overview.
So when we talk about intuitive eating, what exactly is it? So what does this entail? First and foremost, it's trying to make peace with all types of food. This can be really hard in today's society because we like to categorize, we like to make sense of certain foods, and that brings on the good or bad type of language, which we'll talk about later today. So intuitive eating takes a step back from that and trying to create fluidity and flexibility around eating, which is really beautiful to the nature of hunger and fullness, to the nature of building that more positive and supportive relationship. You might be thinking right now, well, does that mean I can eat whatever I want? Well, not necessarily. It simply means that once we listen to hunger and fullness, we're able to better gauge and recognize what do I truly want and how do I feel satisfied by having a fair portion of it rather than feeling like we have to eat the entire plate or kind of clean the plate, which again we'll go into further detail a little bit later. And so when we eat intuitively, you really get to let go of that idea of you need to lose or we need to gain weight so you can look a certain way. That type of narrative makes finding innateness with food rather challenging because we're constantly trying to manipulate food in a way that will quote unquote better serve us and or family. And intuitive eating starts to let go of that and associate food in relation to, well, fuel, in relation to satisfaction, in relation to I feel good when I have X, Y, and Z versus I should have X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so next kind of looking at supporting your child's innate relationship with food. So think about how children kind of grow in spurts. They have, we track that growth for their first few months where we're looking at tremendous growth in their first 2 years. Then it kind of slows down again, and then they hit that big growth spurt. So sometimes they eat like that too. Sometimes they eat as much as you eat. It's like, wow. And sometimes they eat maybe one cookie a day, and that's kind of all they want that time. When you kind of think about it, this is one of the most important things looking at intuitive eating is if left alone and you don't nudge them, they're going to get everything they need within a day, within a week. So it's better to look at a whole week versus one day at a time when we're looking at their relationship and what they're taking in. Their food preferences vary greatly, just as I'm sure you might say that yours do as well. I'm definitely too short and you can't see me. I definitely just realized I was like staring at your eyes. I was like, hold on, just go this way.
I thought you were standing here.
Yeah, no, I was like, my God. So that's kind of, it comes back to, so don't worry if they just want to have peanut butter and jelly for many weeks and then they won't look at it for months after. For example, I had a lot of chicken pot pies as a kid. I can't even be around the smell of them anymore. Absolutely not. So think about it, if you kind of maintain that no judgment, that neutrality of, well, you've always loved this, the child is less likely to go back to that food later in life. Alternate foods every other day as well. That can kind of help maintain their interest in different foods. So try to offer, the peanut butter jelly plus maybe something else, an apple and peanut butter, to just kind of sway those choices back and forth. And then kind of back to that last part, look at that entire week instead of looking at one meal, one day. Because at the end of the day, they're going to get every single thing they need in.
I mean, either way works. So leading into this, it really comes, well, I'm sure that you've heard of autonomy, right? How do we make sure that your child feels confident and builds that identity as they age? And the same can be applied with food as well. Children want to seek that autonomy, and as parents, you have this beautiful potential to help them through that by allowing them to serve themselves at mealtime. Sometimes parents always feel, well, I have to serve them to make sure they're getting enough. But how can children learn that innateness if we're perceiving that for them, which is rather challenging? We're kind of taking away that ability to recognize, Mom, I'm full. Or maybe I need a little bit more, I had a busy day today, or something along those lines. And so integrating that maybe into your dinner time of let's all put our plates together, right? What might that look like? Do we have a grain? We'll talk about the specific portions a little bit later, but do I have enough of a protein? Do I have enough of a grain? Giving them the space to then ask for more if they want it, or to say, I've had enough. They will take what they need without feeling pressure to clean the plate. Again, we'll talk in much more detail, but I see this a lot of given a plate and then having the assumption, well, I have to clean all of it that's on there, or I can't leave the dining table until my plate is clean. Again, that's almost an attunement disruptor. It takes away from being able to recognize what a child's hunger and fullness is doing. Because we know physiologically we're all innate. That hunger and fullness is very innate. We're all able to recognize what they need from us in a very natural way. And then nextly, involving children in food shopping or meal preparation. Sometimes the fear is, well, my kid doesn't like X, Y, and Z, or they won't eat X, Y, and Z, or so on and so forth. Well, let's help them build that relationship far before actually sitting down on the table. Let's go to the grocery store. What are some things that look appetizing to you, right? That has a really strong relationship, as well as your relationship with your children as well, of being able to see that development, see that progression from the very start is really important. Do you want the clicker before I do anything else?
Is that why I had the clicker? All right, so since being at middle school, most of your kids are gonna be a little bit older than 2 years old. But think about introducing new foods. It's gonna be an art form. We kind of make or break how we develop their own relationship with food. So parents often expect their children to try new food when offered, even if it's only a bite. So feeding conflicts can arise without understanding how children react to new experiences. We can talk about that, but we'd be here for a really long time. So we'll stick to more of just the food portion of it today. So experimenting with food is one part of the battle, especially if introducing new food or foods prepared in a new style. So when presenting the new food to a child, and this kind of goes at any age, present it with something that you already know they like and they're familiar with. So that helps bring them into a positive environment, positive situation, having, it's like when they want to take their blanket to bed with them. So that comfort item that's there can kind of help ease. Think about presenting, several new foods at once. It can be really overwhelming to them. It's like when they go to the first day of school, they don't know anybody, they barely know their teacher. Overwhelming experience. Something to kind of think about too, at age 2, that's when children start to become fearful of new things. That's when fear can kind of develop for them. At age 2, you're introducing a lot of new foods to kids and developing that relationship. So that's when you want to kind of go back to that attunement that we were talking about earlier of not forcing that food, letting them touch it, letting them feel it. That helps them then build that positive relationship of, okay, at 2, you don't know this, but at 2 in their mind, okay, my mom force-fed me broccoli, now I don't eat broccoli because of that. They're more likely to accept and try new foods when they are ready, if they don't feel like they're being pushed, as well as if they see that you are eating those foods as well. So role modeling, as we'll talk a little bit more, is crucial throughout this entire thing. In order for your child to become an intuitive eater, you yourself need to be an intuitive eater. You probably have heard the stat before. It takes up about 20 exposures for a child to accept a new food. So focus on serving it from time to time without that pressure, that neutrality, put it on the plate. Don't make a big deal out of it. There it is. It's also common for some foods just to not be a preference. They're just not gonna like some foods, and that's gonna be how that it is, just as we as adults just don't like certain foods as well. Okay. All right, now we're gonna talk about food talks. That's not good, that bad. How can we talk about food in non-moralistic terms? We are taught, especially now, everybody in this area's world, we are taught, as kids, good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, and those terms give that perception of there is a good, there is a bad. So we want to think about, telling children that some foods are bad. They can still instill feelings of guilt. So instead, what the intuitive eating book and frameworks likes to use is this food called play food, and that's instead of using fast food, unhealthy food, bad food, junk food. So it isn't necessarily nutritious for your body, but then it still is going to taste it. It's going to taste good. So that's looking at that nutrient density versus as non-nutrient dense food. So think about letting go of that term junk food. Because that can elicit that shame for eating something that has no value to them. Then kind of with these kind of discussions paired with unrestricted access to these foods, it reduces your risk, that child's risk of gravitating towards those food and fixating on that play food when they're at another kid's house. So if they know they can have it at their house, it's there if they want it, innately they're not gonna go towards it all the time. So it's kind of about that access that we talk about a lot throughout intuitive eating as a whole. I broke it. Got it. I broke it.
So 5 takeaways so far that I think are really important to highlight. First and foremost is sharing the benefit of nutrition early. A lot of times, kind of like Allison said, of putting the broccoli on the plate, great exposure, but let's add the why, especially as kids enter middle school and go into high school. That's a really great opportunity for them to understand the why behind and be that much more motivated to do the why, right? Adding a variety of foods on the table as well. That variety component helps them explore, helps them feel a part of their intuitive journey for the family as well, of exploring the foods they do like, exploring the foods they don't like, right? If I had Thanksgiving every single day, I'm gonna get pretty sick and tired of turkey. And the same applies at home with any other meal, right? If we're having that kind of rigidity and those very specific types of food, it's really hard to explore what kids do and do not like. Nextly, packing lunch that have a variety of choices, including those play foods. It's really easy for the candies and the chocolates to be enticing if they're only introduced into the house once in a blue moon. They become that junk food persona. They become that really special food, but they don't have to be. Similarly to what Allison said earlier, the play foods are, yeah, they may not have the most micronutrient dense component, but we as a culture have the ability to enjoy foods, and that has a really special place in our lives. So let's introduce that in normalized fashion, because as we'll go through here, if we introduce that Snicker variety at lunchtime every once in a while, once Halloween comes around, they're going to be less likely to want to overindulge because they know they can have it, right? Nextly, make nutritious snacks available for your children. The availability factor is also really important. Children are still developing that ability to put foods together. It's different in having the apple in the fridge than having the apple on the counter, right? Or having the granola bar in the pantry versus having it on the table when the kids come home. Having the opportunity to grab it instead of feeling or being uncertain if they're quote unquote allowed to have it because it's in the pantry is also a really fundamental step here. And then trusting your child's innate abilities. They're not going to be perfect all the time. They may very well eat the candy a little bit too much at dinner time, but give them that opportunity to say, okay, maybe my stomach doesn't feel too good if I eat all the candy at once, right? Or maybe I actually really like the vegetables that are served at dinner time. I may not like these vegetables instead, but you have to give them the space to be able to do so. Like with any skill, if you've ever, I heard dancing earlier. If you've ever tried to dance, right, it's not, I can do, I'm sorry, I'm just assuming a certain dance because I'm not very dance literate, but doing the tango, you're not going to do it great the first time, right? We have to kind of explore how those steps move, how those steps come together before you can then add a partner to that. Go ahead before I touch anything else. This is something we see a lot. So going to the doctor's office and having a child be labeled overweight. This is a really hard, I would say really hard narrative to have with children because they don't quite understand what this means. And you as an adult or you as a parent, I'm sure kind of have the red lights going off of, oh my goodness, what can I do? But let's take a step back, right? Fear around the obesity epidemic warns that children living in larger bodies are at higher risk for many health conditions without evidence to show causation. We're taking a step back further. In the United States, a child is 242 times more likely to have an eating disorder than type 2 diabetes. We'll explain the why in just a moment. But kind of sinking in with that statistic, 242 times more likely to have a disordered behavior with food than the actual fear itself of type 2 diabetes. Furthermore, studies support that parents using restrictive feeding practice backfires, leading children to eat when they aren't hungry, often resulting in extensive overeating. To the example that I shared before of the candy at Halloween time. If we introduce that variety, just think because it's Halloween, I have variety Snickers at home. If we add that Snickers at lunchtime, right, they're that much more likely to be able to trust their bodies and to trust when they feel full and trust when they feel comfortable with that food than to feel like they have to hide or sneak around or even have those foods at a friend's house. Is this me? Yes. Yeah, I love my stats. So taking a look a little bit closer. A really unique study. So in a study of 5-year-old girls, yes, age range is a little bit smaller here, so kind of looking at this at big picture, but in a study of 5-year-old girls of varying sizes, those whose mothers used restrictive feeding patterns were shown to have the greatest level of overeating behavior by age 9. And so now we're understanding that, okay, using this information, it may not even be the relationship that we're trying to instill with our kids, but it can be our own relationship that may affect their ability as well. Girls, those who perceived parental pressure and control around food began to restrict certain foods and eat emotionally. So now we're understanding, okay, there's an emotional piece that's coming into all of this. And then thirdly, a 2003 study found that dieting was associated with binge eating among both pre-adolescent and adolescent young people. So to the facts that we shared earlier, the autonomy piece is taken away when it comes to dieting. The ability to trust is taken away when it comes to any type of relationship in our language brought into the home. And so we're seeing that this is then leading into what is quote unquote labeled as the obesity epidemic. Right. So that in and of itself, it's not the food that we've been labeling as good or bad, it's the relationship that we're trying to instill that has that negative effect and or potential to have a more positive effect. Right. So in these 3 studies alone, we can infer that dieting has a very causative link to impaired behaviors. Oh, okay. So taking a moment here, if you have a piece of paper, great. If you don't, just an opportunity to kind of think of. As I go through this checklist, try to identify if any of the following food rules apply for you. Kind of like I talked about before of if your relationship with food is at a challenge or at a struggle, that may very well influence your relationship with your children's relationship with food. So taking a look here. Again, no need to identify or to speak out loud, but just kind of a brainstorming activity of when I eat at a restaurant, do you choose entrees that have the lowest calories or points? Weighing frequently. Measuring food. That language of I ate too much, so now I need to compensate with exercise. Food avoidance because of specific items inside the food, whether it be sugars, fats. Calorie counting. All of these items kind of driving home here have that really receptive response to a child's then behavior in the future. Children are extremely receptive to the behaviors that you follow. If you've ever said a naughty word in front of a child, they're going to take it wrong with it in a similar way here. Ultimately affecting their relationship with food and movement, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Ooh, still me, right? Get all of me today. So what can you do? Like I talked about before, create that conversation with your child and see what they may want help with. Introducing that autonomy, creating the narrative, finding that comfortability with your child is really important, right? If at any point your child perceives that I can't talk about certain foods because they're bad foods or they're no-no foods, that already creates that barrier. They may even appreciate help with breakfast or lunch, but may not be able to verbally share that. Maybe they're not having breakfast because they don't even know what breakfast should look like. And it's, all right, let's talk about it. Do you have a fruit? Do you have a source of calcium? Do you have protein? What is protein? A lot of times we'll have adolescents come into our office and we'll talk about carbs, proteins, and fats, but they're like, I don't even know what that means. And that's okay. But this is the age where that narrative and that language is extremely beneficial. Not falling into that trap of telling your teen that they can only watch the television or be on their phone after they have their afternoon snack. That association connects relaxation with food and can fuel the behaviors of mindless eating. We know that this mindless act is an attunement disruptor. I keep saying that word because it's the ability to, not necessarily the ability, but it's the way in which we lose that connection with hunger and fullness, which is taking away from intuitive eating. We want to kind of fuel into intuitive eating. So an alternative to this could be having a snack available for him or her, and then allowing them to do a non-food related activity to relax afterwards. Let's have this snack, and then if you want to listen to music or you want to play a video game after, then do it before you start your homework. But putting those two things together fuels that mindless behavior that we're trying to get away from. And the same applies for adults. I mean, I don't have enough fingers on my hands to say how many times I've eaten at my work desk. And that's and that's something that I have to stay away from, because I know that that's taking away from my ability to recognize my hunger and fullness. And talk to your teens about people they're following on social media. I love this one. The TikTok and the Instagrammies. Help guide them away from people who endorse dieting or weight stigmatizing messages. They may not even realize it. They may see someone who looks great, feels great, have this beautiful lifestyle, but at the same time they're promoting green juices, they're promoting weight loss pills, they're promoting excessive movement, but they may not even realize it. We realize that, right? As adults, we're like, okay, well, look at this gimmick, let's move along here. But for children, they're thinking, oh my gosh, my life would be so much better if I used X, Y, and Z. Sorry.
Now I move it.
No,
All right,
anyway.
let's look into movement then. So this is the fun part. So we know a lot of exercise has a lot of different benefits. We can use it for stress. We can use it to increase bone strength, decrease blood pressure, lower your risk of different chronic diseases, increase your metabolism. That list goes on and on and on. But kind of stop and think. What is your attitude with movement? Because that's going to play into what their attitude with movement is. A lot of times we see with movement, your attitude is, I'm just going to do it, or I'm just going to forget it. Kind of one of those two. So we often see that working out goes hand in hand with negative impacts of dieting, with ineffective food plans. Often we see underfueling with exercise, but we do see those who are exercise resistant, which includes those who have bad experiences growing up, such as being forced to run laps, maybe being teased for being picked last for the kickball team, whatever those may be. Maybe rebelling against a parent as well who pushed that exercise is a really good diet. So we want to focus on building a positive relationship with movement for your child, but that starts with your own relationship with movement. So that's kind of why that first question was stop and think, what's your relationship with movement? Different things to think about with that is, breaking through exercise barriers. So that can be for yourself or them. Don't force movement if you do not want to have movement that day. That comes for you and for them. Wait until you're ready or until they're ready. In the grand scheme of things, waiting an extra month or two to feel ready is not going to change the overall outcome of your exercise at the end of the day. Focus on how it feels. This is a really big one. This is the key to consistent exercise. If you are doing a movement that you drag yourself in to do every day, you absolutely hate it, you leave the gym hating it, you're not apt to continue to do it years and years and years from now. And I can tell you that. I work at a gym. I've seen a lot of people come in, and I've seen a lot of people go out really quickly. So it matters that it feels how it feels to you. That's going to help you take that shift away from the numbers, because the basis of intuitive eating is taking away the value of a scale, taking away the value of what you weigh. Thinking about what you're able to do is helpful for how it feels. So do you feel less stressed? Are you less edgy now that you got a workout in? Do you feel more alert? Is your attitude more positive? Do you feel stronger? Think about those things that are going to empower you. Then kind of focus back to weight loss. Let's decouple exercise from weight loss. Physical activity we know is one of the most consistent elements associated with long-term health. But if your focus is weight loss, and we know the weight loss long-term is not going to be successful, it won't motivate you to stay exercising. It's only going to serve as a time card, just like your job would be. No one can deny that a small child's natural desire to move. You see them bouncing in their chair, you see them running around the backyard, and there's a lot of different explanations to why kids become inactive. We'd be here forever if we talked about all of those. But similar to intuitive eating, we want to serve a variety of light foods to your kids. We want to focus on modeling those positive behaviors. We want to do the same thing with exercise. Moving and being active as a family can help them, children and then teens, maintain that innate desire to move. What I like about that one too is, family walks, things like that. I have, some younger clients right now, 10, 11. Walks to them are not movement, but that is movement. So get going together. Maybe you all go on the neighborhood walk with your dog. Show them all of that from a young age. There's different varieties of movement, but they're all movement at the end of the day, and that helps some label some of that good, bad movement. It's all just movement at the end of the day. So if we're to focus less on trying to control children's eating and more focus on families being active together, we might see fewer sedentary teens and children. So let's talk about how we approach intuitive eating to physical activity. So there's kind of 5 basic guidelines here. So one, it's going to be build intuitive sense about movement through infancy and toddler ages to promote and maintain movement in teenage years. So that's going to look like engaging in family activities. Let's take walks together, let's hike together, let's play sports, let's rollerblade, let's bike, let's ski, let's swim. 2, we want to focus on encouraging your child to be involved in group sports, dance, martial arts, some other form of movement, because what this movement's going to do is going to allow them to find this activity that gives them a sense of identity, helps them find joy and self-esteem without promoting that competitiveness environment for them. Role modeling is imperative. That might be the biggest takeaway at the end of the day, is role modeling. So find an activity, this comes back to you. You need to find an activity that you find pleasure. So your child then sees that you enjoy movement. On the flip side though, be mindful not to promote compulsive exercise. So we want to be mindful, because that can then turn them off from exercise, or on the flip, it can turn them into their own excessive movement behaviors as well. 4, we want to be aware of extended media on child and teens. That comes back to this, okay? We know that extended screen time can decrease chances for engaging in regular movement. So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that parents prioritize creative, unplugged playtime for infants and toddlers. Some media can have educational value for children starting at around 18 months of age, but it's critically important that this high quality program for school age children as adolescents, wow, words are hard, sorry. The idea is to balance media with other healthy behaviors, is that quote. Lastly, be aware that physical activity should not be promoted as a means for weight loss. That comes back to just what we talked about with you. This includes yourself, how you view movement, which is why we start by looking at our own relationship with movement. If your child recognizes your anxiety about weight, any talk about movement for the purposes of helpful to them, that could be interpreted as weight loss, or in a harmful way. Maybe movement's resented, maybe movement is rejected because of that language that they're hearing growing up. So focus on giving your child their own confidence to trust in their ability to eat and their own ability to move. Because at the end of the day, we're all born as intuitive eaters. We just get a little bit lost along the way. Your favorite?
I love this stuff. So a little bit too often I hear parents say, well, you can't, I kind of shared this a little bit earlier, can't move from the dining table until you finish your plate. Intentions are there. Intentions are pure. We want to make sure that nutrient needs are met for our children. However, going back to kind of the principles of what we're talking about here today, again, an attunement disruptor. Encouraging your child to clean a plate before they're able to leave the table creates an externally based pattern of eating and a barrier to experiencing genuine fullness. We're using a predetermined plate of perceived food to determine fullness rather than those innate cues. A few ways to slowly step away from this is allow pause. Allow pause to experience fullness rather than stopping when the plate is empty. A great way to do this for the family is every couple of moments, everyone comes in with a fact, right? A fun fact at the table. That allows pause and allows connection at a dinner time. And in and of itself, that pause allows for that feeling of fullness, or the welcoming of fullness. This is also seen in packaged foods. So stopping using that internal cue rather than finishing the package. Sometimes we have, if you guys have ever seen kind of those servings of Oreo cookies or peanut butter crackers or anything along those lines, it's almost assumed that we have to finish the package. Sure, if fullness and satisfaction is there, yeah, absolutely. But if not, why? It's a curiosity factor. Curiosity is extremely important when we're thinking about intuitive eating because that assumes kindness as well. If we're being curious about what fullness is doing, we're allowing ourselves to be gentle. We want to finish the package. And now on the flip, being kind and gentle to ourselves, maybe we just don't. Maybe we only want 2 or 3 crackers, and that's enough for us. Factors that can make this challenging and reinforce the cleaning the plate is when experiencing extreme hunger. Thanksgiving is coming around. I hear far too often, I'm not going to eat anything until dinner time. Well, why not? Let's be curious and gentle to ourselves. Why not? Do I have to finish the entire plate at Thanksgiving time? No. Will I still have the ability to enjoy the turkey, the stuffing, the mashed potatoes? Yeah. But it's really hard to do that if my stomach is growling and if I'm starving. Okay. A great practice activity to kind of introduce this idea is to break the tendency to be automatically eating all the food on the plate. Try leaving 1 bite or 2 bites of food uneaten. Maybe explore this pattern first with yourself before you start to come in tune of, maybe this is something I'm doing at home with my kids. How does that feel if you leave a bite on the plate? Does that feel really uncomfortable? Then maybe there is this relationship with I have to clean my plate at all times. If it's not and it's no big deal, beautiful. Explore that hunger and fullness a little bit more. Ooh, sorry, that got cut off, guys. But as you can see, there are 2 different forms of plate methodology. What you see more so on the right is the healthy eating plate by the USDA. You probably have seen this around at some point or another, whether it be at work or at a gym or something or other. And then what you see on the left is something that majority of intuitive eater practitioners, like Alice and myself, try to help encourage clients to get to. What are a few things that you notice? What are a few of the differences? There are no wrong answers, friends.
It's not a pyramid anymore.
Yeah, it's not a pyramid anymore.
Do some vegetables count as starches?
There are non-starchy and starchy vegetables, sure.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
potatoes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like potatoes. Yeah.
On the left it says fats.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
On the left it says fats,
On the left it says fats, yeah.
which is not something that you normally would see when you're talking about food. It's always avoid
Exactly.
fat. The word fat is bad, right? So, but there are some like good parts to that, I guess.
Absolutely. And then on the healthy eating plate, they use the word of healthy oils. Basically, they're synonyms to one another. Sure. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that comes to mind? No, that's okay. I'll talk all day. Don't worry. Okay. But some of the very clear differences here is the healthy eating plate on the right is very specific. If we really zoom in here, when we're talking about healthy oils, you can only have olive and canola oil. Right? Or if we talk about, they don't even carbohydrates, they incorporate whole grains. Stepping away, when I'm talking about this, step away from kind of the good or bad type of idea. I'm not bashing whole grains. Whole grains are great. But we see that this plate already adds a notion of you can only have whole grains. Healthy protein. Fish, poultry, beans, nuts, red meat, limit red meat and cheese, avoid bacon, cold cuts, and other processed meats. Very specific again. And this is what children are seeing. This is the information that's available to very impressionable kids. Eat plenty of fruits of all colors. Sure. Nothing wrong there. But then as you can see on the left is, at some point or another, all those components are still there. The language is just very different. Fats. I love that example. Olive oil is a fat. Love it. So is butter. Whether I eat fat from butter or whether I eat fat from olive oil, my body knows exactly how to break it down the exact same way, which I think is sometimes really hard to sit with. It's going to break down each and every one of those fatty glycerols the exact same way as whether I get it from olive oil or whether I get it from butter. Yes, olive oil has omega-3s, sure. But I really like butter with my pancakes. There's no way I'm putting olive oil on that. And again, that allows me to step away from the idea of, I can't have the pancakes even though I really like them. And maybe when I do go to IHOP, because I don't usually have them, I'll eat the whole stinking stack. And you can see how those steps are slowly starting to lead into one another. And kind of going back to the starches that you shared before, we have fruits or vegetables here on the left, and then grains and starches. Yeah, potatoes, corn, things like that absolutely are classified as grains and or starches or carbohydrates or good old pasta. Okay. And the looseness that you see here, there's not a calorie count attached to it, there's not macronutrients attached, or a very specific macronutrient range attached to that, for the very simple fact that we're trying to elicit that ability to recognize hunger and fullness. They're the best type of natural calorie calculator out there. I guarantee it, and it's free.
And this healthy eating plate has to be publicized in every single school.
Right.
So they will see it.
So what are some behaviors to look out for at home to try to understand if whether or not your children's behavior is slowly starting to be skewed? So first and foremost, if you notice your child is binge eating or barely eating, recognize that this may firstly be a sign of emotional distress or unmet needs. Right? So let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe we're having a bad day, maybe things are going on. What are some active things that you can do as parents? Let's explore quality time with them. Let's go for a walk, kind of like Allison said. Or let's watch a funny movie together. Or let's just have a conversation. It was so funny. I called my mom before I got here, and I was like, "That's the best quality time I could have had." Add enjoyment to mealtime. Trivia games, fun facts, table games. Right. Add that ability to connect at mealtime. There's always going to be awkward pauses. We're all family. We all have our things going on, but adding that familiarity and that funness almost with food again is really important. And let it be known that their feelings are appropriate and may be expressed as much and for as long as needed. The emotion is what is then fueling the behavior with food. So then we don't want to mask the behavior of food of saying you can't eat this. Let's take a step back even further. Let's address the emotion piece. What's going on? Maybe it's really hard for some children to regulate their emotions or even understand it. And secondly, if your child is undereating or overeating and becomes clear that they may need support, tons of resources out there, which we'll talk about it towards the end. We're almost through here, but seeking a counselor, psychotherapist, nutrition therapist, like Allison and myself, who is trained in intuitive eating and eating disorders. I oftentimes hear a lot of people say, well, I just want to eat normally. 80%, right, thank you. 80% of the population at some point or another has disordered patterns or skewed relationship with food. So then what is normal? If majority of the population is struggling at some capacity, what is that normalcy? Maybe, and so in that and of itself, that normalcy may be unrealistic for how a child may perceive it or how any type of person on the street may perceive it. I'll try that last tidbit. There you go.
Alright, so I won't read you through all of these. We'll be here forever. I'll just go over them. Basic physical. These are physical, not looking at that emotional side that she kind of talked on. What are we looking for in terms of looking for disordered eating disorders? We're looking at dramatic weight loss from gain. A lot of times we get clients in, they go to the PCP, they come home, oh my God, my kid lost 10 pounds between last year's and this year's visit. So that would kind of be a one key or there. An obsessive preoccupation with body image. Food, checking themselves at the mirror, you notice a lot more body checking, kind of looking how they physically look. Change in food appetite, purging, restricting, binge eating, those are going to be some basic ones. Misuse of diet pills, they're always eating in secret. You always used to eat as a family, now all of a sudden they want to eat by themselves. Those are kind of some of the big ones. I won't read all of them because I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A too. You want to do this one?
So if we're taking a step back, I think one of the most fearful components of seeking help for your children when it comes to eating is, I don't even know where to go. I don't even know what to do. It's so overwhelming. Here it is.
We get a lot of calls.
We get a lot of calls. So a few ways that you can address this. First and foremost, maybe just starting at your PCP. Let's see if needs are being met. Let's see if vitals are appropriate. Let's see if labs are appropriate. Maybe there are a few things that you can do at home to kind of positively create that momentum to get kids to where they need to be. That's a really great first step. Check in with your PCP. If things need a little bit more support, a therapist and or nutrition therapist or dietitian are viable options. Therapists primarily help with more of the cognitive distortions that come along with disordered eating, whether it be I don't like to eat certain foods because it makes me look a certain way, or kind of like Allison said, maybe there is that body checking component, maybe there's a misinformation around the relationship of food, body, movement, so on and so forth. And these can be done through family therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, so various different ways that a therapist can slowly start to help support your family and your children. And then if we're thinking about dietitians in and of itself, we have a lot to do with the process as well. We can help with that nutrition education piece. We can make sure that nutrient needs are met. We can make sure that resources are available to you as far as nutrient needs. We can make sure at some level that client or children's medical needs are met at some capacity. We have the ability to check vitals. We have the ability to check a blood pressure, weight, things along those lines to make sure things are moving in the direction that we want them to.
So lastly, we kind of have just a snapshot of different resources here. AED is the Academy of Eating Disorders, so that's a professional organization that you can use. I won't read you through all of these. We have them for each different type of eating disorder. So you have anorexia up there on the next one, binge eating as well. This multi-service MEDA is really important too, because that includes, well, what if my kid doesn't fit into anorexia or binge eating? Where do they fit? So that looks at some of the other 5. That looks at some of the other 3 diagnoses as well. Okay, so they don't fit here. where do they go? That can give you more information. NEDA is going to be the National Eating Disorder Association. That's the largest nonprofit in the United States for preventing eating disorders and providing treatment referrals. Beautiful website. Check it out. And then I think I'll be done. I'm going to go to Q&A. Any questions?
Okay.